looking at my computer. So we'll once the official meeting starts, we'll have the typical one going up on the town website.
Gotcha. Yeah. Look how high tech and fancy we are in the town of Somers.
Well, we try, man. We try.
Well, I think that's what they're going to do with zoning. Jen's been working with.
This side or this side?
What?
Speaker.
I don't care. It picks up everything, so I mean, it's a great speaker. Just watch sure you don't kick it. You know what I mean?
It won't go any further than that.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, let's see.
I think that'll work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so zoning, Carl's been working with Jen and Jill about proceedings.
Hey, Brian, on your screen, you should be seeing just the Town of Somers website. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, I see the Town of Somers webpage.
Perfect.
An easy one, not Hillsdale, and then see how that goes. So.
Yeah.
For all the New England fans out there, I put on my Buccaneer shirt for you because
You're getting way too cocky, way too early.
I would send an image to you, but I'm afraid it might be public, so I won't.
I want it in cash. I don't want a check. Okay.
Say again, bud?
I said I want my bet in cash, not a check.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Wait till you find out that Brady was nothing more than a system quarterback.
Stop that.
well, it's better than the lack of system we have. So.
Right now, Bud, we just have you, we have Brian Wensinger, and we have the folks here at Town Hall. Tim Keeney's just starting to show up, so we should have his audio shortly. John Roche just showed up.
We're still waiting for Carl.
Yep. We got a few minutes to go, too. Yeah, I got Claire behind me.
Yeah,
I got it.
I'll choose this one.
The email does say that the camera is live now, just so
Yeah, I
you
know.
know also.
Thanks.
Okay.
We're here for your entertainment, Brian.
I appreciate it.
If people have nothing better to do this Thursday afternoon, they're all welcome.
Absolutely. I hope people tune in. Last Board of Selectmen meeting only got 7 views the last time I checked. I don't know.
Yep.
I think people have other things on their mind.
I know. The radio station, did you guys listen to it?
I have not.
Well, when you get in your car, tune in and listen to the announcement. It's really good.
Okay.
People are saying, I don't have a radio. You don't need it. Get in your car. That's all you
What
do.
was it, 89?
89.7.
89.
Yep. There's the
It's
digital
Chris.
sign is up in front of the former fire department,
Yeah.
police station.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's Chris Boucher. You make him. He's got the.
He's a DJ now.
Yeah, he's a DJ. now, so. He's got that nice tone.
Part-time or permanent?
Yeah, he's got a nice
Jam's
tone,
voice.
so. He does. He sounds really
Is he
great.
playing any oldies in between the announcements?
No, but I want to think about what we're going to put on it because I'd like to change it weekly. And
That's a good idea.
We can talk about that too today, I guess.
So, Bud, do we want to wait for Carl to join before we start the meeting?
We can go through some of the agenda. He's going to join later for the interpretation of the executive order from the governor, but we can put that on the list. Don hasn't joined us yet. Chief, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Why don't we start the meeting? Present is R, Tim, and Patricus, and Tim Keeney, Selectmen. Mike Marinaccio, the Chief Financial Officer. Ryan Wissinger, our Assistant Finance Director. Chief John Roach. Kim LaFleur, Operations Manager. Glenn Reynolds was not able to today's meeting, but I assume John will fill in for him. And then Carl Landolina, our town attorney, will join us at a later date. The first item on the agenda, John, is the Emergency Management Director's update with a COVID-19 virus. A couple points to be made before John makes his. The latest information I have is there are 800
Hey, Bud.
positive cases
What are you
in
doing?
Connecticut.
Bud? Bud, your phone may have dropped from in front of your mouth, so if you could restate that.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes,
That's better.
yes.
Yeah, there are 875 positive cases in Connecticut, 19 deaths so far. Apparently 60% of the positive cases are in Fairfield County. And from the information I have, there's 113 people who have been hospitalized. So without further ado, John, I'll let you give the additional report in terms of where we stand.
Sounds good. Everybody can able to hear me okay?
Yes, thanks, John.
Sure, no problem. So just some notes from Glenn and myself. We're working on this. Again, we appreciate everybody's patience as we're kind of adjusting to a new settings, a new way of doing things and conducting meetings and everything online. Technically, the town's emergency operations center is what they call a partial virtual activation. Unlike past emergencies where the goal was to get everybody in one room at one time to kind of work through the town's issues, now the goal is actually to find ways of working and communicating kind of remotely and dispersed. But we are going to have that up and running. Glenn is going in there and making daily updates to the state using the web EOC platform. There have been a lot of information requests from the state on what we have for gear, what we've got for preparedness, what our plans are, what the town is doing for community services and things like that. So we are responding to those requests on a daily and timely basis. We've also been doing a lot of outreach with other neighboring towns. Glenn has been on the phone with emergency management directors from neighboring towns. We've also been working with Trinity Health, which is Johnson. We've also been working with Department of Corrections on getting up to speed with some of their plans. Knock on wood, they do not have any cases currently in their facilities, but that is something that definitely has a lot of us concerned. As Steve Jacobs and myself were both also on a call yesterday with Connecticut Public Health, the state is currently estimating 3 waves of this virus kind of coming through. Obviously, we're in the start of the first wave. They're expecting it's going to trickle off a little bit in the late summer. It's going to come back in the fall. And then again, a third wave probably sometime next winter, early spring. So again, we're very early stages of the first wave. They are estimating roughly, according to the state public health, their models, and again, it's the best on what they have for information, which they admit is incomplete at best right now. But they're assuming about 10% of the state's population is going to get sick roughly in this first round. Summers, if you're talking roughly 8,000 residents, not including the prison population, that's about 800 people. From a fire department perspective, the thought is, or the assumption is, about 10% of those are going to need emergency or 911 services. So 80 to 100 transports. So it's going to be a decent uptick in service in the next couple of weeks, but not unmanageable.
There, of course, there's no issues from the prison, right?
Correct. So that the big star or the caveat against all of that is if this gets into the prison, all bets are off.
Yeah.
The prison, we have been talking with them. They do have some extra space, extra capacity, specifically between Enfield Correctional and Northern Correctional. They have some wings that were not currently being used. They are thinking, or they are currently any patient that may have any signs or symptoms are trying to segregate and isolate the best they can. But what does have us concerned that we are talking with them on a little bit is obviously Osborne does have the infirmary wing or the state's chronic conditions patients. So we are all trying to do everything we can to make sure it doesn't break out there. But if it does get into especially Osborne, it's going to be a challenging situation.
John, what's the population in Osborne now?
By the way,
Hello?
can anybody hear me?
Yep.
So the question,
John,
the question was for John. So Bud, to just try to coordinate the folks on the phone, if you'd please ask John that question again, and let's give John a response time.
yes.
Yeah, this is Tim Keeney.
John, what is the
I can't hear
population?
you.
Sure. So I believe the question is, what's the prison of the population? I don't have the exact head count of each facility, but I want to say Osborne's going to be about 2,800. I think Northern's about 100, 150. Willard, Cybulski, it depends on which side of the town line they're on, but they usually run about.
Hello.
Yeah, this is Tim Keeney. Is there some way I can get on this call?
Tim, you're on the call. I'm going to ask you to hold off because John Roach is giving us a report on the prisons.
Okay, fine. I had no one indicated they could hear me. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
So again, I'd say ballpark, it fluctuates, but I'd say right now it's probably about 3,000 to 3,500 in the town of Summers.
So I guess the concern I have, John, is what plans do we have in case this does permeate through the prison population in conjunction with Enfield or whatever? I mean, we could have a real staffing issue here.
Correct, and I think what the prisons are still trying to work up and trying to figure out what they can get for resources. As with everybody else, they're looking for nurses and gowns and equipment. They do have medical wing at the facility, but it's a matter of staffing and equipment. So we're trying to figure out whether their plan is, are they going to transport patients out, or are they going to try to treat in place or stand up like a more additional medical wings within their facilities. I think the way they're leaning, but again, it's a matter of resources and equipment that we're all fighting to get at the same time.
Thanks. Tim Keeney, do you have any questions for John Roach?
I think I heard about the last 5 or 10 minutes of his presentation. Took me a while to get on here.
Okay.
And I have no question.
Just to keep going so that's the high level for the kind of the state public health update. Actually, on the general overall, the EMS emergency calls region-wide, not just in Summers, are actually down slightly. Typically, we're seeing is people don't want to go to the hospital if at all possible. So it's the day-to-day call volume has actually decreased a little bit. We do want to stress for public safety, both the police, fire, EMS, we're all still here for the community. We're all being a little bit smarter on how we operate, minimizing crew sizes, trying not to come in direct contact with people until we make sure we've got some sense of exactly what's going on and if anybody might be sick. Summers is doing pretty well for personal protective equipment at this point in time. And also did reach out to some of the other departments and just quick updates for those, also for the Board of Selectmen. Social Services has pointed out that they're really starting to ramp up. Meals on Wheels is still running. It's a slightly different format. They're doing like every other day, and they're delivering food cooler outside the house, just so that way there's no person-to-person contact. But they are seeing a couple of new requests for that program, and they're getting a lot of questions from people in the community, things like energy assistance bills, how to file unemployment. I think similar to what we're seeing statewide and nationwide, there's a lot of other impacts to this that are starting to notice. So social service is something that we're going to need to keep an eye on. As time goes on, I know the town got an emergency assistance fund and things like that, and food bank. We just need to keep kind of tabs on that.
John, this is Bud again. Just so you're aware that Allison Maynard has put out the social services resource list, and that's been broadcasted to 4,700 homes via the schools. So we're getting that information out. It's also on the town website as to where people can go for things like energy assistance or unemployment insurance or financial aid or mental health, emotional responses. So we're communicating in that regard.
Nope, absolutely. So I think we're all trying to do what we can to get that message out, and she's definitely been doing a great job on putting together some of the materials and put like a one-page flyer together for town, and working with the schools and getting that word out through their distribution system as well. But obviously when you send like a notice like that out, it does get a lot of people's attention, and then people start doing follow-up calls. So
John,
they are working with that.
John, this is Tim Petrikis. I've got one question for you. You mentioned 3 waves. It sounds like we're going to be in this for a while. Are there any forecasts on what the second and third wave might do for impact either statewide or in Summers?
They haven't gotten that far with the modeling. The only thing that they said in the call is that they're assuming by the end of the third wave, probably 60 to 80% of the population will have gotten it at that point.
Tim, this is Bud. I mean, obviously the information is fluid at best.
Yeah.
And what we're hearing is that with 60% of the positive cases in Fairfield County, I think we're probably looking at a similar kind of exposure here up in the north central part of the state. But again, nobody knows. It really depends upon how you mitigate and what the restrictions have been.
Okay, thanks.
Some other updates from some of the departments.
Could you just, got a question for Bud here. Bud, could you just reiterate what you just said about Allison and putting out information on the town website with regards to financial aid, energy assistance?
Yeah,
what else did you mention?
Allison had put out a resource list through social services that's been broadcasted to the various various households in town, approximately 4,700 people associated with schools. And she gives a listing of where people can look for financial aid or utility assistance or mental health, emotional responses, or unemployment insurance, those kinds of things. So people have a handy method of accessing this information. To my knowledge, Kim, it's also been put out on the town website, too, so people can access that also.
Okay, one thing you might want to add to that is small business assistance that the state is making available. Somehow we can hook up to that. I think it would assist our residents.
Yeah, I think that comes from the Economic Development Commission. That's something that Tim Petrikis has suggested, which I think is a good idea. We can get a hold of those folks and ask them to list those small businesses, et cetera. They have the wherewithal to do that. So I'll follow up on that.
There's also federal assistance that will be available as soon as the bill gets passed by the House, signed by the President, which is actually a grant. It's going to turn out to be a grant rather than a loan, which small businesses should be very interested in.
Of course, we're making the assumption the House will pass it, which I think they will. But you're right about that, Grant.
Right.
So for Tim and Bud, while that discussion was going on, if you are looking on from a computer, I went over to the Social Services Department on the town website, and those resources are indeed listed. So thanks to Allison for getting that done quickly, but they are up there. So if you're watching this online, also you'll see that on the screen right now. So
thank you. I can see that. Thank you.
Yep.
And for those people that don't have access to computers, these blasts are going out on a daily basis from Brian Sepla in the schools. So I think this message is getting out.
Great. John, anything else from your perspective?
Yeah, so a couple other things, just running it through. The superintendent of the schools would want to stress that while the physical buildings of the schools are closed, classes are in session. Developed what the best they can is a fairly robust distance learning program. They said they were fairly well situated going into this with the one device per child from grades 5 through 12. They've issued another 150 iPads to those in need. And the schools also are required to continue to offer the meals to go. Even though they're not doing classes or lunch at the schools, they are doing basically lunches to go. I believe you said about 250 people partook on that earlier this week. So that's something they are continuing to work with and provide. DPW just wanted to point out that they're still working. They're at full operations, and actually they're using this opportunity to get to some of the projects that would normally have inconvenienced day-to-day operations. So replacing light fixtures in some of the buildings, deep cleaning some of the buildings, and doing road work at some of the roads that was like interrupting the bus schedules and things like that.
In addition, the important thing is the transfer station is open.
Transfer station is still open.
Yeah, I got 3 calls today.
So he is stressing that is still up and running. The fire department, again, we've still normal operations and responding to calls. I know there were some questions about what might be like financial impacts, things like that. Each of the departments is obviously going to have their own kind of response to this, pluses and minuses. The fire department kind of took the lead for the town on trying to organize getting cleaning supplies, wipes, gloves, dust masks, things like that for all the other town departments So that was like $500 or $600 or so in supplies, which did come in. We do have distributed those out to all of the different town departments, especially people that are still operating, so that way they've got stuff. The fire department did ramp up on what we needed for our own personal protective equipment. That's probably going to be at another $2,000 just for the selectmen's point of view. And then we did stock up about $2,500 was for additional medical supplies that we think we're going to need. So it's going to be oxygen, masks, nebulizer treatment, IV fluids, things that are typically used in bulk when going through for this type of flu and flu-like symptoms and respiratory ailments. So we did want to get ahead of that, and we did bulk up a little bit, probably a little over a month ago, so those supplies are actually in and in-house. So we're actually in pretty good shape for having to respond from an emergency perspective. We also mentioned that for whatever time Glenn needs to do for the state paperwork or responding to the calls or the EOC requests, we have made him available to do that and have been backfilling his position as needed here in the fire department with other part-time staff.
John, I want. God, I'm sorry, Tim.
John, I was just curious. This is Tim Keeney. I'm just curious. Do you expect any build-up in the emergency EOC or the needs for the director to spend more time on this emergency?
I think it is going to continue to increase. I think that what we're finding is it's getting crazy with the state conference calls and updates and requests. I wish it was a little bit more coordinated on the state side. We'll get one call from public health, and then for the ODM, then we'll get one call from the regional hospitals want to do a call. Now we want to do fire chiefs want to do a call. Emergency management wants to do a call. Public health wants to do a call. So there is quite a bit. I mean, the communication's great and getting the information out, but it is definitely much more of a time-consuming process than it had been, which is not the end of the world, just something to be aware of. I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes almost full-time for him if this gets into the full surge in the next few weeks. Luckily, we do have that capability or capacity to kind of shift around some of the people and who's doing stuff here. We've also got some other staff members here that are starting to step up and kind of backfill and being able to assist him on days when he's not here. As we said, also,
how often is he not? What's his schedule like? How often is he not there?
So he currently works 3 days one week, 4 days the next, which was the typical fire department rotation.
Okay. And
we got him a cell phone. I mean, that was ordered a while ago. It finally came in yesterday. I'll get the numbers out to the Board of Selectmen. So he now does have a town cell phone, and will be a lot more available to be reached through that as well.
Thanks, John.
John, I wanted to compliment you as well as Glenn. Glenn's really stepped up to the plate, and I appreciate your coordination during these unsettling times. Thanks again to both you and to Glenn.
Yep. The only last question that Glenn and I both kind of had, or a couple things we wanted to touch on with the board, was obviously I know it's going to come up as communications, both internal and external. From an external perspective, we do have the town's website. Facebook's up and running. Glenn now does have a Twitter account and has been posting updates to that as well. I forgot, he said he's got like 80 or 90 followers already, so he was actually kind of impressed with that. Both the school and the rec department have email distribution lists, and the town has actually been leveraging those quite a bit. As we said, that's how we've been getting the social services information out to the 4,700 households so far. The town radio station is up and running with a recorded message right now. We currently have one message on there from that Chris recorded, but it was basically a statement that Bud had put together. What we are going to be doing, that Glenn and I talked about, is giving each of the directors an opportunity to record a snippet and then put them kind of back-to-back messages. So there would be the first Selectmen's announcement, then a social services announcement, then maybe something from police and fire, maybe something from the schools, and kind of maybe something from town hall, and then rotate through the messages that way to leverage that platform a little bit more.
Good idea.
Yeah.
So we are working with that, starting to record some more messages, so those will be going up so that doesn't get stale. As far as the internal communications, we now as we said, we finally got ourselves a GoToMeeting account. We were using a lot more conference calls and things like that. Question that Glenn and I had for the board was, what exactly type of information would you like from us, and how often, and that type of trying to figure out, make sure that we keep you guys and the board in the loop at the appropriate level.
Well, I'll make a statement. We're planning on having boards of selectmen meetings on a weekly basis until further notice on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock. This is in addition to the directors' meetings we'll have on Tuesdays at 10 o'clock. So my feeling is that we should get input both from Tim and Tim as to whether or not this is sufficient or we want to expand this.
I think from my perspective, but I think once a week is going to be sufficient unless there's some sort of breaking information, in which case, Kim could reach out to us and let us know that there's a special meeting planned for the next day.
Yeah.
I think that would work.
Yeah, unfortunately.
This is Tim Keene. I think that the weekly meetings should be sufficient. I think that John Roche's question, though, was as to what it is we want to hear. And it would be helpful if we sort of had a category by category rundown as to what we hear on a weekly basis. And obviously things like exposure and equipment supplies and actual responses, and I think are all very helpful. So possibly we can come up with some kind of a format that we can, that he can produce that meets our needs.
Yeah, the only thing I'd like added to that would be health of the staff. So, everybody out there working on behalf of the population is fantastic, but if John senses that we're going to run into staffing issues either because of time or health reasons, a heads up on that would be good to know.
Yeah, I think that would be a subset of exposure.
Yeah, yep. Does that give you enough to go on to start with, John?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think budget would also be another issue if there's a budget consideration or concern or need.
I can put that on the agenda as I'm going to have ongoing things. I'll do updates. I'll do budget updates, expenses, whatever. Just the normal stuff, so you guys can talk freely about the subject. So.
Oh, that'd be good. Okay.
Yeah.
So, John, if there's nothing else, I see Carl is on the line now, so we can move to the next item. Unless there's anything else, John, that you have for us, or that any of the other selectmen have for John.
I'm good.
Okay.
That's good. I'm good.
I am too, John. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So, Bud, I believe the second item is the discussion on
the budget update
on the budget.
Possible.
Yep.
So I've had Carl join us. Thank you, Carl, for attending, and also Mike Marinaccio. So I'll let Carl, along with the interpretation of the current budget situation.
Yeah, can I just give everyone the update and then let Carl comment on what I'm saying? I think might be the best approach here. So, is that okay with you guys?
That's fine with me. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so on Monday evening, the 23rd, the Board of Finance approved the budget. They approved the expense budget and the entire budget, and they chose to make up the $1.2 million budget gap with general fund reserves, feeling that our reserves were still in good shape beyond the best practice percentage that's recommended by the government finance officers. And then they also felt it wouldn't be the right time to increase the mill rate to a population who, many of whom are going to be unemployed. And they would worry about if there were any revenue shortfalls in the year, then we would address them as we encountered them. So that said, I think on the same day there was an executive order issued by Governor Lamont talking about providing some relief in terms of in-person budget adoption requirements. And what I had done was put together a document trying to show the two different versions. I've been since informed by Carl that one of my steps in my document, where I say public hearing eliminated, is not accurate. Public hearing is not eliminated. Public hearing would be a virtual public hearing. It's confusing because normally the public gets to air their thoughts in that public hearing, and they'll have really no way of doing that other than sending in emails or phoning in their comments. But that's the executive order just requests that the town take all reasonable efforts to publicize, and so that would be. So what I've given you is I've given you two documents in your package, and I'll explain them briefly, and then we can ask Carl to comment. The first one is a draft of what is sent out every year, a budget flyer. It's owned by and sent out by the Board of Finance. They're currently looking at it, and will get back to me by Tuesday of next week with their comments. Basically, reading it now again, the only error that I have in here is that this action eliminates the need to hold public hearings. That wording would need to be modified, that there would in fact be a public hearing and the date would have to be associated with that.
Do you have a tentative date for that, Mike?
Yeah, well, that's a good point, Tim. What I like to do is walk along the same path we would have followed, the same timeline track, had there not been an executive order.
Okay.
So that said, our public hearing date under our regular actions would have been April 21st, a Tuesday. Our town meeting date would be May 5th, a Tuesday, and then our referendum date would be May 12th, a Tuesday. And what I would like to do, based on reading the executive order, is to follow that path and have the virtual public hearing on the 21st, the same date, and then have the selectmen on May 5th. Instead of a town meeting, the selectmen on May 5th would authorize the Board of Finance to adopt the budget and set the mill rate.
So we would need a special meeting for May 5 then for the Board of Selectmen?
Yeah, you would.
Okay. And just for anybody looking online, I've got up on the screen right now the Town of Summers annual budget procedure that Mike is reading from. So thanks,
Yeah.
Mike.
And you know, in that intervening time between the 21st of April and the 5th of May, it gives people a couple of weeks to digest what they've seen. They can go see it either live or recorded. They can then submit comments, emails to me or the finance department, or Brian Wissinger in the finance department, or the selectmen, or phone calls. Any kind of feedback is welcome, and the finance department will compile that feedback and provide it to both the selectmen and the Board of Finance for consideration prior to setting and finalizing that budget. So then on May 5th, the selectmen will authorize, having known all the comments and seeing what's transpired, will authorize the Board of Finance to adopt and set the mill rate, and then 1 week later, which would have been the day of the referendum, the Board of Finance will hold a special meeting, as they always do the evening of the referendum, and vote to adopt and set a mill rate. So it would just follow the same path. No one's rushing into anything. No one is trying to do things to fast track. We will follow our same path. It's just that we are now in a virtual world as opposed to in a person-to-person world. So you can read this document over. Like I say, the only thing that I will be changing on it is item number 3 under Executive Order 7I. I currently have it entitled the public hearing eliminated comment period. It will be, the public hearing will be virtual, and we'll still have the comment period. So that explains that document. And then, like I say, the other document which is the flyer, will go out sometime either toward the end of next week or the following week in advance, announcing that there will be a public hearing. This shows the summary of the budget. It provides some narrative, but then again, all the budget information that you really need to see and want to see will be on the web page. So,
and Mike, if the Board of Selectmen approves a budget on the 5th, does then that go back to the Board of Finance to set a mill rate, or does that happen?
What the action, and Carl is welcome to join in on this one. The action by the Selectmen is to authorize the Board of Finance to vote to adopt the budget, because they have the power to do that, charter-wise, and to set the mill rate, which again, they are the only ones that have the power to do that.
Great, thank you.
So in essence, we're
going to go to Tim Keeney first, Bud. Tim, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
The question is, because of all of the factors that have been changing rapidly in the last few days, like the bond markets, investment returns that might be deeply reduced, does the executive order give the town any additional time? And basically, the implication here is that would it benefit the town to spend a little bit more time to better understand what's going to happen to the projections in the budget related to the current financial climate?
Can I jump in here?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Carl. Thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if I might, maybe I'll take a step back, and so that, in addition to understanding this particular aspect, that everyone understands the context in which all of this developed. So going back to the third executive order, 7B, which was signed by the governor March 14th, he suspended in-person open meeting requirements of the Freedom of Information Act. And read that in context with his previous orders. Any meeting in excess of a certain amount of people would, whether in a civil context or a social context or whatever, was already suspended anyway. So you are required to have these meetings the way you're doing this meeting virtually, and there are 5 provisions in there that have to be met, and so you have the technology to do that. You're using Zoom, so you can do that. 7C, which is in a direct response to Attorney Keeney's question, 7D order, Section 5, which was executed by the governor probably the 12th, March 15th, provides that notwithstanding any requirements of charters, special acts, ordinances, Title VII of the general statutes, that any budget deadline, and when they say deadlines, they mean the deadlines either provided by charter or statute or special act, including the deadline to have the Board of Finance act on a budget, the Board of Finance to have a public hearing, the annual meeting or referendum, which might take place thereafter. If any of those deadlines, are set to fall on or before May 15th, which you have some deadlines which are scheduled to fall before that, your public hearing date, for example, then you have the right to extend the dates out 30 days. So you could extend the process out essentially 30 days. So that would give you, your vote is what, sometime you said May 12th? Did I hear that date?
Yes, you heard that correctly.
Yeah, so if you want to, you could extend the whole process out to June 12th if you so desired. That would require a vote by the Board of Selectmen in its entirety, a majority vote. So, and you could create, alter or modify the schedules and deadlines regarding preparation, submission, hearings, and taking action. So So Tim, you are correct. Well, you could do that if you so chose to do that. That would get you a month. There's no indication that it will go beyond that month, but you certainly have the right to do that. Then the next step taken by the governor with respect to this is, there's some general language in a March 20th order. This is Executive Order 7H, which is called the Coordinated Response Effort. And it says effective immediately for the duration of this public health and civil preparedness emergency, notwithstanding any other section of the general statutes, the chief executive officer or designee may not issue any orders that are in conflict with the executive orders put in place by the governor's office. So, to the extent that there's language here that requires you to do something, you must do it. You can't modify the governor's orders. This comes into play with Order 7I, which is the one that Mike's been referring to, which was executed by the governor on March 21st, which suspends in-person budget adoption requirements. So you cannot have a referendum on the budget under the governor's orders. You cannot do that, whether it's in May or June.
Okay.
Unless there's another subsequent.
Cannot do what?
Sorry?
Tim, can you
I missed that. Cannot do what as a result of?
You cannot have a referendum on the budget.
Okay.
You cannot do it.
All right.
Whether that referendum takes place on May 12th or June 12th or somewhere in between, unless this order is changed, if the circumstances change out there in the world, he may pull back some of his orders. But under the current orders, you cannot have a referendum. And the only way you can adopt a budget in May or June would be for the Board of Selectmen to authorize, in your case, it's the Budget Making Authority, which in your case is the Board of Finance, to adopt a budget by majority vote. And then after they adopt the budget, they would set the mill rate. And that would be the budget and the mill rate for the town for the next fiscal year. There's no other way to do this under the governor's orders. All right? Now, one of the things that when I read these orders in their entirety, and a bunch of us, I belong to the Connecticut Association of Municipal Attorneys, and believe me, we have been discussing this. I mean, there's probably 100 emails every day back and forth on different questions. Every time a new order is issued, it causes a number of emails back and forth between the commission, the Attorneys Association. But one of the things we talked about was because the governor's order is 7I-13, which requires a referendum, said it was including but not limited to annual town meetings, referendums, special meetings, and some other things. So there was a question as to whether it applied to the public hearings as well. And unbeknownst to many of us, and it was pointed out to Attorney Rich Roberts from Allen and Sage, who was worked on with OPM on the process of drafting some of these executive orders. The governor's office is not doing it entirely. We've got attorneys, municipal attorneys, and other attorneys throughout the state who are working in cooperation with OPM drafting these orders. And there is a document which you may want to download and print for yourself. It's called Frequently Asked Questions on the State of Connecticut's Actions Related to COVID-19, Governor Ned Lamont. Now, the version I have is March 23rd, so it's a couple of days old as of 1:30 p.m. So it may be updated occasionally as well. But it's supposed to be sort of like the guideline for how to decipher some of these orders. And in the guideline, it said that the order has been interpreted, and we've talked about this with the association, to mean that the order requiring referenda does not apply to public hearings. So you are required to have a public hearing, a virtual public hearing. Now, the fact that you're soliciting comments prior to that is all well and good, but you still must make, by either conference call or video conference or other technology, on a date certain, which if you're going to have it April 24th or whatever it was, 3rd, and that's the date you pick, you must have the capability to have a virtual public hearing, which not only means it doesn't have to be video. You're not required to have video, but you are required to have voice communication between and among members of the public and members of the Board of Finance, who traditionally, I think, probably run that public hearing.
Yes.
So that still needs to take place. And now, one of the issues that we've talked about in some of these seminars and webinars I've been on is the ability of the technology you're using to handle a certain number of participants. For example, Zoom, which you're using, and I don't know if you use Zoom Basic or Zoom Pro or whatever, there's a limitation that starts at 250 participants and goes up from there, depending on what level of service you contracted for. So you want to make sure that you have capacity. And since people don't have to get in their car and they're locked in their homes, you might get a far larger participant number than you might otherwise get. So you want to make sure you're able to handle it. So like any meeting under FOI, if you had a meeting scheduled for the conference room at the town hall, just in a typical day, and the capacity or the number of people who wanted to come in over the capacity, you would have to cancel that meeting or reschedule or move it to another location. So if you, let's say, have a version of Zoom or whatever you're going to use for this public hearing that only had a capacity of 250, and you notice that more than 250 wanted to sign up on the day of the meeting, you'd have to cancel it and reschedule.
So,
now,
Carl,
as far as the requirements of notice, you're not required to have newspaper notice for this public hearing as typical.
Oh, really?
Some people are not getting newspapers, so you have to have the notice in time, 14 days or whatever in advance on your website, and you would go through that process, and you may want to have on your signpost outside as well.
So Carl, I have a quick question for you. That today's meeting I'm using under my license that I've got through my employer, which is limited to 900. I can make sure it's available that evening. Is there any restriction of using a commercial vendor's license? And I just did it today for convenience, but if we're going to have, if we wanted to use my license, we can, as long as there's nothing stopping us from doing that.
So here's my suggestion. The town, because not only we're talking about your meetings in this public hearing, we're talking about zoning board of appeal meetings. We're talking about planning meetings. We're talking about board of finance. They all have to have this capability.
Yeah, we should get our own license.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
The town itself should be getting its own license.
Yes.
Okay.
I agree.
And I think that's one of the first things. And you can investigate. I mean, there's WebEx as well. People are using. We had a seminar yesterday with CCM, the Connecticut Council of Municipalities, and the Council of Small Towns, and they suggested a number of technologies. The state uses actually Microsoft Teams. And if you want to talk to the IT folks at the state of Connecticut, you can probably get a license through them and at a lower cost than you could do getting it on your own. Right. My guess is it's probably the most expensive of the three.
What, Microsoft Team?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Microsoft Team.
Oh, so I wanted just to go back about the legal notices. We don't have to do that?
No, you have to do the notice on your website.
We don't have to put it in the paper?
No, because people are not getting the paper. So publishing any notice in the paper has been suspended.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
But I'd also suggest, if you have a signpost out front, that you post it there as well.
Oh, okay. That's cool. So
when you do the agenda, the the link to Zoom or whatever has to be posted not only on your website so people have access to it.
All right, we can do that.
But also printed on the agenda.
Okay.
You still need an agenda.
All right, that's easy enough.
Yeah. So whoever's tasked with that, I think, because people are going to want to start having meetings, boards of finance, and whatever, and the zoning and the land use folks. License.
Okay, that's good. That's easy enough.
So Tim Keeney, did Carl answer your question about timelines and things, or did you want to restate that?
No, I think I understand that we can postpone the timelines by up to 30 days if we think it's in town's best interest.
It's not necessary.
Okay, thanks. Is there any action we have to
Did you
take
hear
on
me?
this agenda item? Yes, thank you, Tim.
Hello.
Is there any action we need to take on this agenda item today? Then, can you restate it? I don't have an agenda in front of me, Mike.
It's budget update. No, there's no vote necessary.
Yeah, I just put it on there just
Okay.
because I didn't know what was going to happen today. So.
Great.
So if I could, Tim, if you want to, at some other time, work with me on, the requirements for posting agendas and all that kind of stuff.
Thank
There
you.
is a draft resolution that the Association of Municipal Attorneys are floating around
Okay.
for budget adoptions, and I'll get a hold of it, and maybe, we can look at it and go from there.
Okay.
But as I said, the important thing to learn is to get the message out there to the people, A, that they can participate in the public hearing, which is going to be scheduled, and B, that they are not under the governor's orders. And this is not discretionary. This is mandatory.
Yes.
Because on the political side, they didn't want people, the administrative officers of any kind of boards of selectmen or mayors or whatever, hearing from their constituents that, well, the town of Torrington did it this way, why can't we?
Right.
So the governor said, no, we're going to make it mandatory for everyone to do it this way, and that's it. So everyone in the state will be similarly situated, and there is no discretion in the process.
Great.
So just to summarize, I've tried to put together a process that on a going forward basis here for the annual budget adheres to the governor's executive order, but also adheres to our charter timeline so that we do things in accordance that way. So,
So we could probably have a meeting, a Board of Selectmen meeting, May 5th to approve authorize the budget to be sent to the Board of Finance, correct, Mike?
yeah.
And Bud, just a point of clarification: if things changed between now and that date, and maybe Carl, you could weigh in on this. If things changed between now and that date, and we had our public hearing, could we on May 5th vote to push it out 30 days if we needed to?
No, because your charter,
Yes, you could.
you could.
Okay.
Okay.
Pending receipt of a change in the orders, but yes, you could. So you
Okay,
could have your
I
public hearing on the
suppose.
same date and then decide from there.
Okay.
All
Thanks.
right.
So
We only-
that would be a nice safety valve for us, just in case. We can plan today that we'll have that meeting on the 5th to vote on it. If something weird happens between today and the 5th, we'd at least have a safety valve on that date to make a correction if necessary.
All right. I like that.
That's good.
The other thing I want to mention to you folks, if I could, one of the issues that we also discussed at CAMA discussions was what authority does the Board of Selectmen have over not only the process but the substance? And the agreed upon answer to that question is the only authority given to the Board of Selectmen in the adoption process under Governor's 7I order is to make the referral,
Yep.
to give the authorization to the Board of Finance. That's it.
Good.
You can't say to them, we authorize you to pass this budget
No.
or adopt this budget
You-
or any
you
conditions
can't talk
attached to it.
numbers or
You don't have the authority. What the Board of Finance does after you give them the authority is within their authority under the Governor's orders. Hopefully it'll be the same budget everyone has agreed on,
Yeah.
but,
Okay.
that you have no impact on what budget is actually going to be adopted in
Well, I
that
think this is Tim Keeney. I think one of the key items here. Is to the possibility of giving the Board of Finance additional time to reconsider where things are based on what's going on in our financial markets and what our basic assumptions are in our budget and how accurate they appear in relation to the current situation.
Yeah, I think Tim, if I heard Carl correctly, we'll have up until May 5th to consider those things. If those market conditions changed between now and May 5th, we could vote on May 5th to delay it another 30 days or 5 weeks, even up until June 15.
Right. So who's going to be tracking those market conditions and how they relate to our proposed budget?
Well, I've been doing that, and I've had recently, as yesterday, a conversation with our financial advisor. So in terms of our bond, any bonding interest rates, that market is coming back. There actually was a bond issued in the Northeast on Monday or Tuesday. So they expect the bond lending market to stabilize.
Yeah, I think about it.
And all the numbers they're talking about are below the assumption rates, interest-wise, still that we had initially made when we appropriated for the bond. The second item is what are we getting paid in terms of interest? Well, clearly it's less than what we thought we would be getting paid, but yet we did not budget at what we were currently getting. We knew that things were on a downward trend, so we expect that to go down. And I'm not so sure it would amount to a material amount, given that we have a almost $35 million budget. 100,000 or so is not even, it wouldn't even be that in the neighborhood of that in terms of its contribution to our revenue. So again, would 30 days make a difference? Maybe, maybe not. We'll keep an eye on it. So,
yeah, what about the collection rate on unemployment in town?
that I wish if I could predict that, I think I could have a job consulting for every town in the state. I don't know we're going to be able to do that. Clearly, we will monitor the trend. We consistently look at this year's collection rate versus last year's collection rate. We've already passed last year's collection rate, so we're thinking that ending up in this current fiscal year, we might have a favorable return to fund balance, which is going to allow us to use a pretty wide chunk of fund balance. So we will monitor that on a weekly basis when that happens. And I would expect if people are unemployed for that to slow down. I don't know the impacts of unemployment on the population of Summers because I'm not really sure where everybody in Summers works. So
yeah.
Mike, let me ask you
what about being able to project surplus from Board of Ed in the town budgets?
I did not get that. That didn't come over clearly.
The question is the surplus projected for the town budget as well as the budget of education could change significantly in the next 30 days.
Again, we're monitoring that. Nothing has changed significantly yet. And when you say within 30 days, I'm not so sure there will ever be a significant change in 30 days. Maybe in the last quarter. Again, we can only monitor it as it's occurring. I'm not sure how any financial model can make this prediction as to what the final impacts will be. We know, for example, that there are going to be expenses associated with this effort right now, and yet on an actual basis, we have not seen a dollar come out of our accounts payable yet to pay anything associated with this. So there's a time lag on some of this stuff, and it's really no way for us to estimate it other than monitor it.
I'd like to go to Bud. I think Bud had a question
well,
also.
For instance,
so if we could,
a good thing to look
If we could go to Bud. Bud had a question that he was holding on to.
So. Board of Education budget that aren't going to be spent because of the closure of the schools.
Tim, I can only communicate with the superintendent and ask him for his estimates. I don't have any other thing at my means to do that. The Board of Ed's budget at this point is totally under their purview. Will he have monies? I'm not sure. He's still paying teachers. That won't change. The classrooms will be empty. Yeah, the classrooms will be empty, and so again, I'm not sure where and what are his discretionary and undiscretionary expenses. He certainly has to retool in terms of special ed costs. He has to retool in terms of meals for kids. I know there's an issue with the bus company at this point where it has not been resolved as to whether or not they're going to be charged or not charged, and that's an issue for them to pursue with some other towns, I gather. So I can't predict it, and I'm not that close to their finances to be able to predict it.
Yeah, the point is the surplus could change significantly in the next 30 days.
Again, the surplus, Tim, is only a projection, and yes, it could change significantly. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but it is subject to change.
Tim, I'd like to go to Bud. He had a question that he's been waiting to have. So Bud, please go ahead.
Thank you, Tim. Mike, just a question. We're going to tap the general fund for $1.2 million to mitigate any potential tax increase. So the question I have is, when we go back after bonding, will that impact in terms of the general fund lower, impact the interest rate? Again, we probably don't know that.
I had the discussion, good question, I had that discussion yesterday with our financial advisor. And she says if we weave a good story around this, which we can say we're concerned for all of our residents in town. We're concerned that now is not a good time to increase the mill rate. We have proven in the past when we needed the money that we could increase the mill rate midterm if we needed it. So we feel very comfortable in doing what we're doing. Plus, our fund balance is still in excess of 2 months of the projected annual budget. She doesn't think it's going to have any impact.
Well, I'm not a financial guru, but I would estimate that based upon what's happening in the financial markets, et cetera, in the economy, that if anything, there'll be downward pressure in interest rates. But we'll see.
Well, they actually went up a bit. So prior to all this, they were getting down to 2, the low 2s, and then I guess there was a period of no action at all because no one wanted to touch a municipal bond, and now I guess they're recovering and they're in the mid. The one that went out was at 253 for a $24 million bond issue. In the Northeast somewhere, I'm not exactly sure. This is what I was told. So, that market will recover, and by the time and I asked the question: should we go early because we're scheduled to go in October, or should we wait till our scheduled date? And I was given the indication that it would be more beneficial to wait till October because things would shake out and settle down.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I could, the other thing you need to keep in mind is that none of the governor's orders regarding municipal financial matters cover bonding issues. So that the orders in 7I regarding the adoption of the budget are strictly limited to the adoption of the budget. So it doesn't apply to bond anticipation notes or bonding of any kind or transfers made interdepartmental transfers made in the next 30 or 60 or 90 days. Those still, to the extent that your charter or the statutes require town meeting approval, you're still going to have to get town meeting approval for those kinds of things. So
certainly, and we're operating under the appropriation that we received in a referendum where we're authorized to do that, to finance.
Right.
So that's correct. Well, you are correct.
My battery is very low here. Is there any way I can hook on a telephone?
Yeah, just dial in with the same phone number and code that you got on the invite, Tim. You can dial in from any phone.
What was that again? I didn't. Did someone give it to me? Just afraid I'm going to lose what's on my screen right now.
The number is 301-715-8592, and the ID number 519-727-7275.
Thanks, bud.
You're welcome.
Everybody ready to move on to the next thing?
The ID number was 519-727-7275.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, with a hash mark after that, right?
Yes.
Pound. A pound.
Okay. Pound. A pound. Okay, I'll give it a shot. If you want to say hi, you can feel free to.
All right, are we ready to move on to the next item? And do we need Carl to stick around? You can if you want, Carl.
You may want to I'm sorry.
Go ahead, bud.
Go ahead. Carl, point of clarification on the implementation of the governor's executive order and any action taken in conjunction with the towns of Ellington, Vernon, and Tala and Stafford regarding a declaration of emergency.
Is there a specific question, or because if you look at
the question is there was no unilateral action on my part. It was consistent with the governor's executive order, and I just want to make certain.
You're talking about the declaration of. Is that what we're talking about?
That's correct.
Okay, so if you look at the Title 28 of the statute, specifically Section 28-1, which is definitions, and you go to definition number 8. It says local civil preparedness emergency or disaster emergency means an emergency declared by the chief executive officer of any town or city in the event of a serious disaster affecting such town or city. There's other language in other sections as well. And in your own charter, section 4-4E, it says, on a declaration by the first selectman that a state of public emergency exists threatening the lives, health, or property of citizens, the Board of Selectmen may enact ordinances to meet such emergency without regard for publication and inherent requirements of this section. So I think between your charter and the statutes, I would say it's pretty clear that the chief executive officer of any municipality has the right to declare a public emergency.
Okay.
Is that one of the questions that you were looking to get answered? Or?
I think that was the concern by both Tim and Tim, that somehow or other we were acting unilaterally.
No, I was just concerned. The problem was lack of communication, I think, was the problem.
I would agree.
And it wasn't really understood what was going on and not getting clear answers.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that, and I apologize for that. There was no intent on my part to exclude anything here, but we were obviously scrambling during these times. So, in the future, if this thing occurs, we'll make sure we reach out.
It was just kind of like it happened.
Yeah, and I would agree, Bud, that I think had we left our scheduled meeting scheduled so that you could have apprised the board that you were going to take that action, I think we would have been a lot more in a better position to support that throughout the community. So if people come to us and ask what's going on, we're all in concert that we're doing the right things, following statute, following guidance, and protecting the people in town. And that was hard to do without being informed. So
yeah, I agree with that.
Just for a clarification, the Board of Selectmen meeting that was canceled was after the fact of this declaration.
My point being, but it would have been great to bring that up and then
to discuss it and better understand it, and you could explain it as well.
Right.
Okay. Well taken. Thank you, Carl. Any additional questions for Carl while he's on the line?
None for me, thanks.
No, I'll probably call him later myself to find out what I can do to assist him as well.
Okay, guys, I'm going to jump off. I've actually got another conference starting in a few minutes.
Thanks,
All
Carl.
right, take care. Be safe.
So long.
Yep, bye.
The next item on the agenda is transfers. Ryan, are you still there?
I am still here.
I guess there's a transfer for Bloom Shapiro for the security analysis that was done.
Yep, so the invoice for Bloom Shapiro has come in for the security assessment that was done. We expended it to our IT technology services account because that's what it most likely represents as far as that's where it should fall. To pay for it, we're requesting to transfer $5,000 from the finance consulting line item, $7,500 from the assessor's contractual services line item, and $4,000 from the audit line item. Those three totaling $16,500 into the technology services to offset the expense.
Is that our portion, or does that include the Board of Education?
No.
No, they're paying for their own out of their own budget.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the transfer as presented by Brian Winsinger in the amount of $16,500. For anyone looking online, those line items that Brian explained are on the screen at this point. So
I second that.
Any additional discussion? All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. All right, Brian, you're all set.
Thank you.
The next item is the authorization of scheduled payments. I didn't receive copies of those, so what is the total?
Yeah, I'm sorry those came. I sent those to your Summers email, Bud. That was my fault. I totally disregarded the fact that I should have sent it to your AOL. But the total, I think Tim has the total.
Yep, I got it on the screen. I can give you the total. It's $147,793.27.
Any additional discussion in terms of specific items by you gentlemen?
I just had a couple of questions. I usually do.
Yep.
Brian, let's see, page 1, the Rec Desk LLC for $2,800.
It's our annual license for Rec Desk, which is our online
Software for registering.
system of registration and payment for Recreation Department.
Okay. The administrator unemployment on that page as well for 1,401. Is that something that? I mean, what does that relate to?
We are paying the state of Connecticut for unemployment. That's at least one, if not two, people currently drawing unemployment from the 2 summers. So that's our monthly invoice.
So is that a potential point of vulnerability in the future with regards to unemployment in the town?
Absolutely.
Staff? Yeah.
It is.
Okay.
And it's a number that's impossible to project because we've had years where we've had no one on unemployment, and then we've had years where we have 4 or 5 people. And it could be somebody who is even a volunteer firefighter for the town of Summers, and because they lose their full-time job, but they draw some sort of earnings from us, we're on the hook for a portion of their earnings of their unemployment as well.
With that though, with me be contesting.
Okay, and then on page 2, let's see, Vision Government Solutions, Inc. About
Yep.
4,400.
That is
Why do I have a different page too?
part of the what's
Then
the
a
word?
reval.
Yeah, it's part of the billing for reval. They've been doing it in installment billings.
Okay. And then I see you've got a check written to Bill Meyer, the third EMS instructor. He's instructing the fire department. Is that what he's doing?
Yes, he
Correct.
is. He's actually disclosed that to Bud and myself and asked us if there would be any conflict of interest if he continued to teach, and we said no, because his invoices are approved by the chief and then sent to us. There's a segregation of duties there, so.
Okay. And who's he teaching?
He's currently teaching an EMR class for 3 of our members, and the class is continuing online or virtual go-to meetings type thing.
Right. Okay. Those are the only questions I had. Thank you.
Welcome.
So
Some good news. Some
but-
good news. The market's up 820 points.
He tells me every day.
It is. That is good news. So I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the payment authorizations in the amount of $147,793.27.
I'll second that motion.
I've got a different amount here, Tim.
Maybe that's what my
Right.
numbers are.
How could that be?
You know
I've
what?
got one. I'll make the motion for $148,837.84. Is that the right
correct.
amount?
Yeah, that's the correct one. I pulled the February 21 up. Sorry, Brian.
So I've got the motion for 148,837.84.
I will second the motion by Mr. Keeney.
Additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. All right, gentlemen, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right,
All in
everybody
favor?
stay safe.
Okay.
Aye. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank